welcome back to my channel. Ublepharus macularis, also known as the leopard gecko. Also, I probably just butchered that name, but that is the scientific name for a leopard gecko. So as you guys probably know by clicking on this video, that this video is going to be about the care, tank setup, and feeding of leopard geckos. I've got my two female leopard geckos here. This is Kalani, and this is Kona. So with this video, we're going to start off with some fun facts about leopard geckos, and we're going to move into the tank setup, care, and then into the feeding of them. So first fun fact, leopard geckos can get about 8 to 11 inches long and can live up to 15 to 20 years in captivity. So remember, if you are interested in getting a leopard gecko, that it is going to possibly be a 20-year-long commitment. So because of leopard geckos' sweet and docile nature, they are very popular in the pet community and have been for a while now. Because of the popularity, breeders have been breeding leopard geckos for years and years and years, getting tons of different morphs. So if you are interested in getting a leopard gecko, just remember that there are now tons of different kinds to choose from, which is awesome. But because of the overbreeding, there is now a hereditary neurological illness that can occur called Enigma syndrome. But now, do not worry if your gecko does end up having this. It is not the end of the world. All this means is that your leopard gecko can more easily be stressed out than a normal gecko would, and they might act or move around a bit weird. But as long as they are eating, drinking, shedding, pooping, all completely fine, normal, they're going to be fine. So leopard geckos are originally from Iraq, Iran, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. So many people, when they hear these different countries, what they think of is a very desolate and sandy type of landscape. Well, yes, this may be true in some regions there. Other regions that the leopard gecko is found are actually a very flat, rocky, grassland type of landscape. Which brings me to the setup of the tank, also the substrate that you should be using. You'll notice that in the tank I'm about to show you how I set it up, I'm using carpet. I highly recommend carpet. I do not recommend using sand for any age of gecko. Like I just said, they're not from a sandy desert type of landscape. They're from a hard rock grassland scape. So what this means is, think about you. So if you've ever stuck your tongue, stay with me, in a bag of Fun Dip, you'll know that your tongue completely gets coated with the Fun Dip. Which you then ingest. So for a leopard gecko, when they go to eat a cricket or a mealworm or anything, they stick their tongue or just grab a huge mouthful of sand, which they then ingest. Because it's sand and they can't digest it, it just becomes a clump, like a rock in their stomach. This can bloat and compact them, which would lead to constipation and will kill them. There are some stores and companies that go, okay, maybe not regular sand, but here, try this calcium sand, it dissolves. No, I've done my own little experiment on that, and calcium sand does not dissolve. If you put water on calcium sand, it literally just clumps up real quick, like it will in your reptile's stomach. So whether it be calcium sand or regular sand, I really just highly recommend not doing that. Alright, so let's move on to the tank setup of my two leopard gecko females here. They are currently in a 40-gallon tank, and then I'll talk about the feeding and care and all that fun stuff after. Alright, so the tank is all set up. As you guys saw, I attached a piece of plywood here because this tank is longer than the stand I have it on. So this is just to make sure that it doesn't tip over. I did screw it into the stand just so, again, the plywood doesn't flip up with the tank if any extra pressure is over here. I just added a carpet just because it looks a little nicer. And then I did put the heater at the bottom of the tank, and I do tape it in. This is not duct tape, this is heat resistant tape. It just helps this stay stuck to the bottom here. So this is the tank. It looks awesome, and it's so much more room than what they had. And I'm really excited to finish setting it up, so let's get decorating. To keep going on the tank setup, another fun fact, leopard geckos can see amazingly well in the dark and are very, very sensitive to light. Their eyes can pick up on some light that we can't even see. Because of this, I do recommend using a heat mat instead of a heat lamp. So you've probably heard that leopard geckos can't see the color red, so it's okay to use a red heat lamp with them. While yes, this is true, leopard geckos cannot see the colors red or blue, they can still see the light. So to better explain this, just because they cannot see the actual color that the light is emitting does not mean they can't see the light. It's just going to be coming through as more of a grayscale tone for them, but it's still visible. So that's why I still recommend using a heat mat regardless of the color of the light. It's just more comfortable for them, it's better on their eyes, they're going to be happier, and they're still going to get the heat that they need. Alright, so let's move on to some of the care of leopard geckos. Let's move on to their shedding. Leopard geckos are kind of like snakes, and before I get a bunch of people going like they're nothing like snakes, hear me out. Shedding wise, they're one of the reptiles that completely shed their skin in one go. And again, I don't mean this as when they shed, it comes off like a sock, like a snake. They kind of tug and pull at it, but it does come in one go. They're not like a bearded dragon or a skink where it comes off in patches over a day or 2 days. They usually, when they shed, they do it all one go, and then they actually eat the shed. If you didn't know this about leopard geckos, I know you're probably like,
ew, why? Why did they do that?
Well, when they shed, their leftover skin is just complete, pretty much calcium. To make up for losing all of that calcium now, they just eat it. They just re-ingest it, and which I think is pretty awesome that they know to do that to keep the calcium in their body and all the other vitamins that they had in their skin. So to help them shed and so that they can re-eat their skin, I'm going to show you guys how I set up a shed box for them. What a shed box is just a more moistened box for their skin to easily come off. Just like other reptiles, it's easier for them to shed if they're in a moist environment or get a bath or something like that. That's what a shed box is. Alright, so now I'm going to show you how I make a shed box for my reptiles, specifically my geckos. You can do this kind of in multiple different ways. I use a old Tupperware box. You can use though like just a regular hide, or you can even buy one online that is specifically supposed to be used for a moist hideaway box or shed box, whatever it is online. But mine still works just the same. So first thing what you want to do, if you're going to do it my way, is get an old Tupperware box that obviously you're not going to use anymore. Make sure it's big enough for your geckos to get inside and be comfortable. They don't need a ton of like height on it. They do enjoy to be kind of squished down, makes them feel like they're hiding under a rock, but I mean if you give it to them, they're not going to be upset about it. Just make sure they can fully fit in here comfortably. And then once you found your Tupperware, you're going to cut out a small door for them. Make sure again they can get through the door easily without scratching their sides. They can just go in. Once you've done that, literally this easy for me, all I do is use 2 paper towels, fold them, shove them inside. Then I take some warm water to mist onto there. You don't want it to be like super wet, but you do want it pretty damp because you're going to be putting this on the warm side of their enclosure, so it will dry out pretty quick if you don't make it pretty damp. And literally that's it. I put the lid back on and I put it on their warm side, and then they come and go as they please. I usually put this in there only when I can tell they're getting ready to shed, and you can tell pretty easily on geckos their colors fade very quickly. So whenever I notice that, I'll just stick it right in that area. Instead of their warm hide, they'll have the little shed box, and then they use it. I take it out and I put that back in. You can keep it in there all the time if you'd like. Some people recommend it. I've never had an issue with putting it in and taking it out, but again, doesn't hurt them to have it in there. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's how I do my shed box. There are different substrates you can use, like moss, you can do eco earth, forest floor, repti bark, anything that will hold humidity very well you can use. I only use paper towel because one, it's cleaner. You can just easily replace it. I mean, yes, you can easily replace the other ones, but also when they go in and out, they're not tracking stuff out, so also your tank stays cleaner. And 2, if a cricket goes in there, I just get worried about them accidentally ingesting substrate. But again, do what works for you and your gecko. I've personally found this way very easy to use and it works really well. So that's what I do, and that is the shed box. Moving on to the feeding. So leopard geckos can go a pretty long time without food. Now, by me saying that does not mean I am telling you to starve your geckos and see what happens. Please don't do that. What I mean by that is, in the wild, just like a camel, when food becomes sparse in more of a desert type of area, they have a little fat pack in their body. So instead of having 2 humps on their back like a camel, they have their massive tail where they keep all their nutrients and extra fat storage. So if they do go a while without food, they'll be okay. So Kona's got more of a massive one than Kalani, but that's just the type of gecko she is. She has some jumbo gecko in her. But they both do the same thing. So for adult leopard geckos, you do not want to feed them every day, and honestly not even every other day. For my geckos, I feed them every 2 to 3 days. This is because they're so good at retaining their food because, again, you got to think of them as wild animals. They don't know when their next meal is coming. They don't know that you're going to feed them in a couple days. So their body is just used to retaining the food that they get. Now what this means is if you feed them every day to maybe even every other day, they can become obese so quickly. So by feeding them every 2 days to every 3 days, this cuts down the risk on obesity for them, and they don't mind it at all. What I'm about to show you is how I feed them and what I feed them, and I'll go into more detail about that in this next clip. Alright, so I'm just going to add some calcium to their bowl really quick. I use Repashy Calcium Plus for them, as well as I mix some Flucker's Calcium because it does have some vitamin D3. So calcium. And then for their food, they eat mealworms. I got the giant kind. So I do keep these in the fridge. If you keep them out of the fridge too long, they actually will start turning into beetles. But I do keep them in the fridge, and I take them out 30 minutes before I feed just so they warm up and start moving around because, 1, it's not really good to feed your geckos or any reptile cold food. And 2, it kind of entices them when they're all wiggly. So I got those, and I got my tongs to feed with. So the girls already know it's feeding time. They're already out. Geez, for giants, these aren't that big. So you guys are probably wondering why I'm feeding with tongs and not just putting the mealworms in the tank or in a little dish, which you can do. You can get a little ceramic dish so they can't climb out and keep it in the tank, and your geckos can come and grab as they please. But the reason for that is because, as you can probably tell, Kalani does not have the best sight. So if I put it on the floor, she jabs her nose into the carpet instead of grabbing the mealworm. She can't see very well, so I have to hold it for her. And then Kona, she's just a little lazy, and she'll just wait her turn. She can get it off the floor, though. She doesn't have an issue at all. It's Kalani. So just like that, she can sometimes not even see where the mealworm is when I'm holding it. So just to make sure that she's eating, I do feed tong, but you do not have to do that. And Kona's just really good at getting it off the floor, but she likes when I feed her. So, but as long as they're eating, it doesn't really matter how you feed them. So for the mealworms, I do give probably around, depending on the size of the mealworms, I give around 7 to 10 each gecko. But after I do the mealworms, I do throw in about 15 large crickets into the tank. I do calcium dust them first, and the reason I do this is because Kona really enjoys the hunt, so I do like to put these in there. It kind of gets her moving around instead of just sitting and being fed. Kind of makes her have to work for it. And Kalani does like to try, and she does get them too. It just takes her a lot longer. So I'm going to show you how I calcium dust them, which, I mean, pretty self-explanatory. Throw some calcium dust, shake them up, throw them in. But I'm going to show you anyway. like I said, adult geckos shouldn't eat every day. This is not true for hatchlings and juvenile though. Hatchling and juvenile should be eating every day to even twice a day. This is because they're still growing, they still need a ton of nutrients, they still need a ton of protein for their body to get to the size of an adult. Adult geckos are done growing, that's why they don't need to eat as often. So the feeding schedule completely depends on the age of your gecko. So I'm sure some of you who have geckos or know about geckos, you're probably like, so how are you able to keep two females together? Because it's not recommended. Geckos are not pack animals, they don't like to be in groups. They're pretty well on their own and they can fight. So I wouldn't recommend getting two geckos. I'm not saying do this. The only reason I do this is because I monitor them very closely. In the year and a half now that I've had them together, they've been doing amazing together. They seem to really enjoy their company. They don't fight. I've never seen them be aggressive towards each other. They're really good with food, and I think one of the reasons they are good with food is because, one, Kona's just really lazy, and two, Kalani has sight problems, so I actually have to hand feed them, just like I just showed you. So I think that's why I can get away with it. Again, I'm not telling you to try it. I'm not recommending it. That is the reason why I have them together. I also have a big enough tank for them to equally have space if they do need the time apart. But leopard geckos are completely fine on their own, and they do sometimes prefer it. So it just, again, depends on your leopard geckos. Mine do very well together. Not all will. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Leopard gecko care. They're really, really easy. I highly recommend getting a gecko if you guys have ever wanted a leopard gecko. They're very, very fun. They all have different personalities. They're all very sweet, and they're really, like I said, easy to take care of. So I'm going to end this video here. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. I had a lot of fun making it. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, or if you guys want another care video on anything, let me know. So I can make that for you. So I hope you guys had a great day, night, whenever you're watching this, and I will definitely see you in the next one. Bye!